Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 12 of A Yank on the Footy. I'm Craig Wessels from Sandusky, Ohio, and I'm glad that you're listening. For those of you who've listened to any or all of my previous episodes, I want to thank you for coming back again. And for those of you who are new to the podcast, I am thrilled that you've decided to take a listen. I can only imagine how busy you are, and I truly appreciate you taking time to tune in to my show. Don't forget that while you can find this podcast at ayankonthefooty.podbean.com, you can also find it on your favorite podcast provider. After you've listened, I would love it if you'd consider giving me a review. It lets me know what I need to work on and what I'm doing well. I would also truly appreciate it if you consider sharing a link to the show with your friends, whether they're fans of footy or not. Don't forget you can reach me at ayankonthefooty@gmail.com or on Twitter at @yank_on, as well as on Facebook and Instagram at @ayankonthefooty. As I move into this episode, I wanted to start out by giving a recommendation for another new podcast. Narrowly Meadows has begun a long-form interview podcast called Ordinarily Speaking. That's a great title. I listened to the first episode yesterday, and it was absolutely terrific. I think she's a fantastic interviewer, and Fox Footy, if you don't miss her already, you will very soon. And before I go on, I want to go on the record and say that this Cat supporter is now a huge fan of Adam Treloar. Young man, what an inspiring interview, and you are going to be a fantastic father. I think you're going to enjoy this episode. It's an interview with one of the first people to reach out to me on Twitter when I began this journey over 5 months ago. Rick Shaibani is the host of the Outside 50 podcast and a member of the LA Dragons USAFL squad. And from the reviews on Yelp, he does a great job on the club's uniforms. The second half of this interview was a complete surprise to Rick, and I think you'll enjoy it as much as he did. So sit back and relax, unless you're driving, of course, and enjoy my interview with Rick Shaibani. All right. I would like to welcome Rick Shaibani, the co-host of the Outside 50 podcast, to the show. Rick, welcome. Thanks for taking time out of your busy day to sit down with me.
Thanks for having me, Craig. I'm glad we could finally do this.
Yeah, we've kind of worked on some different times, and I'm glad we were able to work this in today. And I'm looking forward to this. I think we got some great things to talk about today. And you were one of the first people to reach out to me on Twitter when I began doing this back in October. That's been 6 months ago that I started putting out feelers saying, "Hey, I'm this dumb American thinking about doing this podcast," and nobody really said, "Hey, don't do it." You were very supportive. You were encouraging. You gave a lot of advice. You said, "Follow me on Facebook. We'll talk." We have. It's been great talking about things with you, learning about the game, learning a little bit about your background. And I really wanted to get you on here and kind of share your story, because you have kind of a unique story from, looking at it from two different angles. Now, if I'm not mistaken, you went to school in New Mexico, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I was born and raised in a small town called Lynchburg, Virginia. Dad's British, mom's American. I played a decent amount of sports growing up, but only later in my middle school and high school years, because when I was younger than that, I had very severe asthma. And so once I got older, but I'd always loved sports. So once I got older, I started gravitating toward different sports, played a little bit of basketball, a little bit of martial arts. I was really keen on those for a while. And then when I was in college in New Mexico, I got involved with the club rugby team at New Mexico State University, or NMSU. And
Okay.
My dad had played rugby. Yeah, my dad had played rugby religiously when he was my age. He was big on rugby and on field hockey. So he had always wanted me to give it a crack. So I just figured, hey, why not? So I played for a year and a half until academics started interfering with it. But yeah, that was kind of...
Yeah, it gets, that pesky schoolwork gets in the way.
Yes, yeah. It does.
Yeah. As a teacher, we joke, and if those of you who are at school who are maybe listening, we are joking. At least I am when I'm saying it'd be a great job if it wasn't for all those kids. But yeah, I can understand where the school does get in the way, and you have to make decisions on that. But any significant getting banged up or injuries that you dealt with when you were doing rugby, or was it not that competitive?
Oh, thankfully, I didn't have any serious injuries. But no, yeah, it was good to play a real contact sport for once. And again, it was something that my dad had been so passionate about for the longest time. And he had 4 broken collarbones to prove it. So,
Okay. Okay. That reminds me, someday I'm going to have to tell a story, about my best friend growing up. I may tell it later on in this episode. Now that you mentioned the collarbones, so you finished up school at New Mexico State and you headed off to Phoenix, if I'm not mistaken. Did you not?
wow, you've done your homework.
I'm,
No, yeah, I did. I got an internship there right after graduating in 2015, and I didn't really know anybody in Phoenix really. It was just kind of a temporary pit stop until I could save up enough money to move out to LA and pursue a film career. So in Phoenix, I picked up rugby again. I was with a pretty experienced, pretty veteran side, and they were really good. So the issue was that as a newcomer, it was kind of difficult to get consistent playing time. And at that as well, like my skills were kind of rusty. I really wasn't doing as well as I should have. I definitely wasn't in shape the way I should have been to play a sport like that. And long story short, I was getting kind of frustrated with it. And a friend of mine, Alex, an American guy actually, who was on the team, he was like, "Well, hey, have you ever heard of Australian football?" I'm like, "No, what is that?" And he's like, "Oh, when I was 10 years younger, I used to play it here in Phoenix. It's a really fun sport, and you're a pretty athletic, pretty fast guy. You should definitely check it out and give it a crack." And I thought, "Oh yeah, gee, thanks, Alex, awesome." And as fate would have it, about a week or so later, it was September 2015, and I was at a bar with a friend in Phoenix at like 1 a.m. And lo and behold, the only thing on TV that's sports is AFL finals. And so I'm watching this crazy game on this massive field, and I have no idea what the rules are. And then I'm just thinking, oh, this must be that Aussie rules football that Alex was telling me about. So I YouTubed it, and I saw a few highlights, and I was like, holy crap, I have to play this game. And as fate would have it, again, there was a team in Phoenix, the Arizona Hawks. So I dropped a few of those guys a line. I had a kick about a month later. And unfortunately, Arizona was kind of in a weird spot with their team. Basically, most of the men's players had either retired or moved away, or basically there were only like 10 guys that showed up regularly. There was a decent women's team, but there was no real men's team, and there hadn't been for several years. And of course, this is Phoenix. So, you practice at 8 a.m. on a Sunday. And even then, it's already like 95 degrees Fahrenheit or, 30, 32, 33 centigrade for our Aussie listeners. So it was definitely.
They wouldn't let you in the University of Phoenix Stadium to practice.
I'm afraid the Arizona Cardinals would take exception to that. Yeah.
That was worth a shot.
Right. But yeah, I met a few really nice guys over there. Americans, Australians, all sorts of people. Struck up a great friendship with Ryan Ludo. If you know the USAFL, you know the Ludo family. It's him and half a dozen cousins and brothers and other extended family members. Those guys have been around for a long time. So shout out to them for showing me the ropes. And we had a few other guys that I really struck up nice friendships with. And, when I was just getting to learn this brand new sport from scratch, I was like, hey, might as well be a sponge and listen to the people who are smarter than me and who've played the game longer than I have,
I do that a lot, pretty much with everything in life. Just shut up and listen. Yeah. So you got exposed to it a little bit in Phoenix, and you said you were doing an internship. You're working in the film industry, correct?
Yeah, and after the internship finished, I was still in a position where, I was my finances were looking good, but not good enough for LA, which of course is very expensive. So
right.
It took me about a year before I moved out to LA, and I did that in August 2016. So
okay. And once you got there, you reached out to the LA Dragons team, correct? And got involved with them?
Yeah, no joke. Yeah, no joke. The first email I sent after I arrived in LA was to them, specifically Justin Hall, or Jabba as we call him. He's a Sydney sider. He's been in the U.S. for a while, and he's the president of the Dragons. So I hit him up, and he was just like, "Yeah, come over to this bar in West Hollywood, and we're going to be watching the games." And again, this is halfway through the season.
Right.
I wasn't really sure what to expect, and I didn't really know what I was doing, even though I had a little baseline of experience in Phoenix. But yeah, I played like a few games. Wasn't able to make USAFL nationals that year because of like film commitments and things of that nature. So, but I played a few games. I was mostly playing defender because, that's where most of the American newbies end up because, all you have to do is just prevent people from scoring. And, even the rookies can't screw that up. Well, they can, but, it's still I was going to ask.
Yeah. I was going to ask you where you played, but you answered that for me there. That makes sense that you were playing defense. To start up, that makes complete sense that, start out here, build some confidence, see the field, see the game, watch it, see how it opens up in front of you. That's, I talked to someone online. I don't think it was my interview from last week. Where, I don't know if you've watched like in any NFL games where you get to see like the coaches film, like the all 22, where they show you the whole field from the end zone.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of what if you're back playing defense, you kind of get that look at the whole rest of the field to see how everybody's opening up and where they're going, and which, watching the game on television, I would love to see that as an option to see how the game actually works, because you don't normally, as somebody who's new to the game watching it, I can see what's happening in that small little window that they're showing me on TV, but you don't see everything else. Who's doing what alongside them to get into position to take the next handball or get the kick to them, or, whatever the case may be. It'd be great if they would offer that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's a great way to improve your on-field vision. Like if you're playing whatever place you're playing in defense, obviously you got the center halfback and the fullback kind of barking orders, directing traffic down there. So yeah, you got to be able to react at a split second notice if the footy's coming your way. So it's definitely an interesting spot as a newcomer, because you're still getting used to all the new rules that you've never heard of and all these different things that are, totally a foreign language to most Americans. So yeah, and then eventually, after I kind of knew what the hell I was doing, they moved me over to forward pocket or sometimes half forward flank, and that's basically what I've played ever since.
Okay. So how long were you at the bar? Not at the bar, watching the games, interacting with these people, beginning to start practicing with them before you actually played your first game with them?
It was only a couple of weeks because, again, I did move there.
Quick turnaround.
Yeah, I did move there halfway through the season.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what was that moment like when you're out there playing, and whether you're still back on, on defense or when you move forward, what was that moment like where you're thinking to yourself, I've got this, I'm a footy player?
It took me a while. Even into my second season, because again, I only played about 3 games in 2016, and going into 2017, playing a full Metro season for the first time. And for those who aren't aware, Metro season, at least as we play it in LA, it's a round robin tournament in May and June before Western Regionals. We do games with Orange County and San Diego, and it's basically a way, it's 9 aside as opposed to 18 aside.
Okay.
And it's a great way for American players. Yeah, it's a great way for American players to kind of get used to the flow and the feel of the game and the structure of the game as well. And so basically Metro season is kind of a great way to get your feet wet, build up some confidence heading into the rest of the season. And then once Western Regionals happens in July, you continue the rest of the year, and play the games you're supposed to be playing. So, But yeah, going into that season, my first full season with the Dragons in 2017, not going to lie, I still got a little nervous occasionally. It was still kind of annoying to have to, ask all these questions. I'm sure it annoyed some people to no end, just because you're still trying to figure out a game that, most Australians have known since they were 5 or 6 years of age. So
but
it's very difficult. It's a learning curve, but you get there eventually.
But if you're asking the questions though, that's a pretty good indicator that you give a darn about it, that you want to know. It's not just, not like, I know it all, just leave me alone, let me do it. You're actually, being inquisitive and finding out, okay,
what aspect of this do I not know as well as I should? And can you help me become better? I mean, I think that's, that's a good thing. That's a good thing
Oh
to be able
yeah,
to ask questions.
you got to swallow your pride, but it's all about just learning the fundamentals of a sport that eventually becomes second nature to you. And it's funny that you mentioned that because in hindsight, a few of the guys have told me. I remember specifically back in 2018, we were on a trip to San Francisco, and Freddie Shulin, he's a Danish guy who picked up Aussie rules in Denmark and emigrated to the U.S. About 15 years ago. But yeah, he's been with the Dragons since day one. And in hindsight, he's told me, well, Rick, you didn't know everything at first. Most people don't when they first start out, but you were always really positive and enthusiastic and willing to learn more. And obviously that meant a lot to me. And I like to think that, as long as you're enthusiastic, as long as you're willing to do the hard work and put it in and make sure to listen to your teammates, again, be a sponge, then you're halfway there already. Again, it's going to take time, but everything takes time, right?
Oh, absolutely. I had made a mention of that a while back, and I think it was actually talking about comparing Richmond to somebody else, and how Richmond was may not have the best players, but they seem to function as a team better than just about anybody else out there. They anticipate what each other is going to do. From what I've seen, more so than some other clubs. They may not have the best athletes, but they work well together. But so I agree with you there.
Right, and you can definitely say the same of other AFL teams, all-time great teams. Obviously, you had Carlton's glory years back in the 70s and 80s. You had Brisbane and their amazing three-peat, 01, 02, 03, and of course, more recently when Hawthorn three-peated. Those teams, yeah, exactly. They just gel so well. They're extremely well coached. They're extremely disciplined. They know exactly what their plan is going into a game, and it's very difficult to surprise them, which is what makes them all so dangerous, basically.
Exactly. So you're in Los Angeles. You play the 2016, 2017 season there, correct? You play both those seasons there. Well, the three games, and then
season and a half.
Okay, yeah. So you work in the film industry, and I don't know what exactly you do in the film industry, but is that something you're allowed to share at all, or is that?
Oh yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
I'm a crew guy. I've done quite a few different things on set, and my ultimate goal is directing and producing. So that's my professional background.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're in Los Angeles, and you make the move to Australia. Was this a planned move, or was this an opportunity that came about where you said, you know what, I need to jump on this because this is a great career move for me right now?
It was kind of a combination of everything, if I'm honest with you, Craig. So it all started in 2018. So in 2018, two of my Dragons teammates, Gabriel Martin Del Campo and Sam Murphy, they're both excellent players. They're currently on the Revos squad for the U.S. national team for the men.
Okay.
Very, very, very talented footballers. So Gabe moved to Melbourne. Sam moved to Perth for a year on the working holiday visa to play footy down there. And I thought, hey, that's a hell of an idea. I know they're going to do great down there. Sam specifically had some connections in Perth thanks to Fraggers. John Fragomeni, who's the director of footy for the LA Dragons, one of the founding coaches. He's been around for years. Perth guy who has lived in LA for quite a while, and he's got a ton of really good local footy connections down in Perth. Anyway, it was basically like, oh, they can do it. I should be able to do it too. And thankfully in 2018, the proof was in the pudding because I won the most improved player award at the end of the season. I did a lot of rotating in off the bench, played again, mostly forward pocket. And I like to think I did pretty well. So it was one of those things where I could see concrete improvement. Obviously my first season and a half, it was still a bit challenging at first. 2018 was a real, I don't want to say breakthrough, but I did really well overall. I was definitely happy with how I performed all throughout the season.
Okay.
We didn't do as well at nationals as we had hoped over in Wisconsin that year. But yeah, it was still a really reassuring sign to see how many people appreciated how far I'd come. And again, I'm my own, trust me, I'm my own worst critic. So just that I was happy with how I was doing and progressing. And at the end of that season, I just thought, hey, why don't I do what Sam and Gabe did? And so I applied for a working holiday visa for Australia and for a year. And I got approved. My visa got approved within like a week or two of applying.
Oh, terrific.
So then I was just like, oh, wow, I guess I'm moving overseas at the end of the year.
So did you end up finding a position working on a film crew there as well?
No, not exactly. The working holiday visa is very flexible. You can travel all over Australia. You can work basically without restrictions.
Okay.
Except like you can't hold the same job for more than 6 months, which can be a bit limiting. And then also, if you want to renew a visa, you can do like regional work in regional Australia in certain fields that have a demand and that need to be filled. You can renew your visa that way. But I came over basically just for sports, for professional stuff. I mean, Melbourne is a great city for the arts, so I just figured going in, hey, if I catch on with a film production company, or if I talk to some people down there who work in the arts, and I knew a couple going in, maybe I'll be able to get a chance to work on a few projects. And as it turned out, I did.
Okay.
So it was definitely rewarding for me to be able to make some substantial progress both on the field and off.
Terrific. Yeah, that 6 month limitation on a job though seems kind of that's a rather peculiar delineation there.
Yeah, they need to change that.
Yeah, I mean if you found something you were good, found something you're good at, and the employer liked having you there, that's a rather odd restriction there. Okay.
Oh yeah, they needed to change it, but obviously, it's whatever. So I was just glad I had the opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. So the next obvious question is how does Melbourne's traffic compare to the traffic in LA?
Not nearly as bad,
okay.
But in Melbourne, there's a lot of construction. Like they're doing some train tunnel expansions. They're adding new runways at the airport. And they're trying to, some pretty decent sized infrastructure projects down in Melbourne. So there are definitely some delays. On a normal day, though, like apart from the CBD or downtown, as we would call it here in the US, apart from the CBD, the traffic really isn't that bad. You do have to watch for the trams because Melbourne does have like the trams and everything.
Right.
That's kind of one of the things they're famous. It's one of the things they're famous for.
Okay.
So, but no, it's not so bad, and I didn't mind it.
Now, for just a moment here, I'm going to put my geography teacher hat on because I teach AP geography at high school. CBD is the Central Business District. For those of you who are wondering what that is, okay, I didn't know if any of you were thinking that was some sort of a cannabis type reference there or something. But Central Business District there is what is what Rick's talking about. Okay, so you got to Melbourne and you're getting settled in there, and you joined up with the sister club of the Dragons there, the Caroline Springs, the Lakers.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
And how that kind of came about was back in 2017 at the International Cup. So long story short, Andre Jansen is a good mate of mine. He's one of our defenders for the Dragons. Australian guy. He and his wife moved over, I think in 2015 to LA, something like that. Anyway, they're from Melbourne, specifically the western suburbs near Caroline Springs. And that's where Dre played most of his junior footy growing up. And so basically he had always wanted to strike up a partnership with LA and Caroline Springs, specifically because when he first moved to LA and got involved with the Dragons, he was just amazed at how similar the club culture was from Caroline Springs and LA. And he was really impressed by that. And he had kept, trying to get an official partnership set up. And then when the International Cup rolled around in 2017, we had a few Dragons who were in town on either the Revos or the Freedom or the Liberty sides, the national sides. So we sent a few guys down there. Caroline Springs sent over a few guys. They did like the whole photo op with the jersey exchange. And Yeah, so that was when we officially started it up. And to this day, on one of the banners around the fence at the Oval at Caroline Springs, there's a photo of the two club logos side by side.
Okay.
I put it on my Instagram when I first arrived, and I'm like, oh, this looks familiar.
Yeah. Okay. That's cool. That's
Yeah.
a lot of a lot of cities will have like sister cities as well. So that's now. Were any of the players from Caroline Springs anybody that you had played with in Los Angeles, or were they a completely new group of players?
Everyone was new.
Okay.
A few of them knew who Andre was. Again, he and his wife left Melbourne.
Right. A couple years
2014,
earlier.
2015.
Yeah.
And like 4 or 5 years in calendar years is like 15 in footy years. So there were plenty of players on the squad who didn't know who he was, and some of them didn't even know that footy was played in America, let alone at a high level. So I definitely came in feeling like a bit of an outsider, and also because the Caroline Springs, we're a very young squad right now, and we were young last year. A lot of our best players were like 20, 21, 22 years of age.
Okay.
And we also had a handful of veteran guys who'd been around for a while, like late 20s, early 30s. Got to give a few of them a shout out right now. Mark Peduto, Keenan O'Shea, Bonja, aka Mitch Bongiovanni, Louis Tudor, a bunch of guys who've been around for quite a while. And then there was me, a then 24-year-old Yank who'd only played like 30 games in the USAFL. So obviously it's going to be a bit of a learning curve, and you kind of feel like a fish out of water at first. And I knew my skills were going to be pretty raw coming in, and I'd have to like unlearn a lot of bad habits that I'd picked up in the States. But I reckon I did pretty well, all things considered. And it was just such a fun, awesome experience to just be around a footy club that's so family oriented and has so many good guys in it. And, you know, I miss them all every day.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you about the skill level. Was the skill level with the Caroline Springs club greater than the club in Los Angeles? Just because it's something that these people had, you know, pretty much all done their entire lives?
Oh, absolutely. Like just at senior level, especially because, you know, you got senior and then you got reserves at the local footy level, just like how in the AFL, you know, whoever doesn't make the side that weekend is going to play in the minor league, so to speak, the VFL or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's the same way in local footy. And for those who aren't aware, Caroline Springs is in the WRFL, the Western Region Footy League, which is one of 9 semi-pro leagues in and around the Melbourne area. And so basically there's the AFL, then there's the VFL, then there's those different leagues. So this is literally 2 levels below professional AFL level. Right. So it's very high quality footy.
Okay.
The speed of the players is just something else. And it's just an outstanding atmosphere because, you know, if you know anything about Australians, they love their local footy, and, you know, they'll be honking their car horns after you score a goal. You know, it's a really rowdy and really festive atmosphere. So always a good time.
Now those nine groups, those 9 leagues, are they all autonomous from one another, or do they have like crossovers and play like for like a regional championship, or does that just like here's this group of teams and they're separate from these teams?
Oh, they're all autonomous.
Okay.
And basically AFL clubs recruit from a lot of them. They also recruit from the, you know, the under 18 regional sides. You know, you've got, and I had a few friends who were getting some serious attention. Again, I got to give a shout out here to Cody Rock. He, mark my words, he will be an AFL draft pick. He is a phenomenal talent. Center halfback. His dad used to be footy director or president of the club, something like that. He's been around forever. And Cody's only about 17, 18 years of age. Carlton's looking at him, apparently. Hawthorne is. A few different clubs that are really keen to draft him. He's done really well at all the combines and the camps and all that stuff. So I reckon you'll see him pulling on an AFL jumper very soon.
Terrific. That's fantastic. Now you're back in LA now. Your season went well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, let me, when you were there for that year that you were there, what was your go-to meal? What did you discover food wise that you're going, I don't want to leave this behind.
That's a great question.
Or it could be beverage wise, I guess, as well.
Oh, gee. Getting me nostalgic over here, Craig. But
hey, I interviewed Frode, and he's been sending me pictures of meat pies, and and I still haven't figured out how to make one of those yet.
Yeah. We have a guy here in LA. His name's JJ. He's a expat who has his own meat pie delivery business, and he does really well with that. Considering there are so many expats in not just Southern California, but all over the place.
Right.
But yeah, it's funny because I was already a big fan of fish and chips.
Okay.
I was already a big fan of meat pies because I had visited Australia on vacation or on holiday before I had moved there. I'd also been to New Zealand, and a lot of the food over there is very similar to some extent. So meat pies are fantastic. I knew that going in. Big fan of fish and chips. Again, blame my very British father for that. But
blame or thank? I would assume thank.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
And and I definitely enjoyed. Obviously, Vegemite is great. It's an acquired taste for a lot of people, but I love it. Okay. And basically, I also there's also the cereal, and if you know, Nutri-Grain in Australia, which is it's so addicting and it's really, really good. And I also really like there was this brand of energy drink called V. It came in like different flavors, and I always got the sugar-free kind because I'm not trying to lose, not trying to gain too much weight. Yeah. But yeah, no, it was the Blue V's are phenomenal. Those are great energy drinks that you can't really find over here stateside. And obviously you've got Tim Tams, you've got a bunch of different sweets that again are hard to find elsewhere. Tim Tams are great, and again, don't try to eat too many of them because they're definitely fattening. But I also really enjoyed the Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say there's a reason I don't have my picture up on my podcast. Let's just leave it at that. So I would only be watching games. I'm not participating. Not to mention I'm an old fart. So you keep talking about people like they're old when they're 28 and 29. I'm thinking, yeah, I'm old enough to be their father. So I don't, yeah.
Right.
So you've settled back in, you're getting yourself ready. You're back with the Dragons again this year?
Yeah, we're actually doing our first, practice tomorrow morning.
Okay.
So I'm definitely stoked to get involved again. I'm back on the board. I was on the team, like the board, the committee, previously, as the social media director. This time around, I'm going to be doing equipment, which is just, keeping the bag of footies, the air pumps, the water bottles, things like that. And then of course, making sure all the jerseys and shorts and socks and everything are washed and ready for a game day. So yeah, those are basically the main duties of the equipment guy. And so, yeah, Jabba asked me, oh, hey, you want to put your hand up again to help out on the board? And I was just like, yeah, why not?
I was going to say,
yeah, we had,
having been a football coach for a few years, I'm not sure that's a promotion, getting to do everybody's laundry.
Right.
But, hey, it's getting done right. And you guys, I'm assuming you start playing May or June, right? You start with games?
We're starting off in May. Okay. Weekend of May 5th, Rob Dollar Cup, which is a tournament over in Phoenix.
Okay.
And hosted by the Arizona Outlaws. And that's always a very big deal to us. In case you didn't know, or if the audience didn't know, the Rob Dollar Cup started back in 2018, I believe. It's a Metro footy tournament that hosted by Phoenix, and they invite clubs from all around the country. And it's in honor of Rob Dollar, who played for Arizona, who played for LA for a few years before I joined. I didn't know him, but his brother David is a very good friend of mine, one of my best friends. And sadly, Rob was killed in a bike accident.
Oh man!
In I think it was October 2017. Yeah, he was big on cycling, and he was riding down from South Mountain, big wilderness park in South Phoenix.
Okay.
And he was hit by a drunk driver and killed instantly.
Oh man!
And and ever since then we've we've run that tournament, or technically we co-run it with the Arizona Outlaws, but they host it.
Okay.
And all the proceeds, all the tournament fees, all the merch, everything goes to the Rob Dollar Foundation that his family set up in the name of, in his honor, and in order to help encourage cycling safety.
Okay.
So
terrific. That's a great cause. That's a great cause. It's
yeah, and so that's when we're going to be starting our season. We did try to potentially arrange a match for Anzac Day, which of course is April 25th.
Right.
But unfortunately, it kind of fell through this year, and maybe next time. But that would definitely be a real treat.
Okay.
And of course, with the USAFL, it starts a little bit later than the AFL, and it ends a little bit later. So obviously, the AFL runs from March through to October, or through to September. And then, of course, the USAFL starts a little bit later, like April or May, and Nationals is always the second weekend in October. So it's a little bit different. And of course, Northern Hemisphere, we're playing in the summer while the rest of Australia is playing in the winter. So it's definitely a different dynamic.
Okay. Yeah. It is, you're definitely getting warmer weather to deal with. Now, did you get to a lot of, or any AFL games while you were there?
I did. I barracked for the Giants.
Yeah.
I saw the Giants play the Demons, and I think it was round 11, round 12. It was Indigenous round. I remember that. I got tickets for like $25, and then I also saw which game was that? St. Kilda and Collingwood, I think, and that was a couple of weeks before, if I remember correctly, and. It sounds cliched, but the MCG is a shrine. It's not a stadium. Like, you can just feel the history when you walk into that place. It's one of the biggest stadiums on the planet. Right. It's one of the most historic. Yeah. It's a phenomenal experience.
I mean, I'll put on at the beginning of the school day when I get there. I'm in my classroom by 6. So once the season has begun and games are on, I'm putting a game on and watching it. While I'm working on stuff at the beginning of the day, and my kids will start trickling in around 7:45. And inevitably, they're sitting down. Some of them get very excited about watching their, now that FS2 is broadcasting a lot of games. I've got kids that have started DVRing the game so they can begin watching, but they've become fascinated by, just by how massive the field is compared to, the soccer field or the football field that they play on. And I was going to ask you real quick, you're talking about the Metro League, the 9-on-9. I'm assuming you play that on a much smaller footprint than a footy oval, or do you play on?
Oh no, the fields in the USAFL are slightly smaller, just because how easy is it to find a cricket pitch in the US, but they're close.
Okay,
they're only slightly smaller.
So
obviously the AFL
it's a lot more wide open.
Yeah. And obviously, the AFL doesn't officially have, not all grounds are the same size, even in the AFL.
I'm a Geelong fan. I hear that all the time.
Oh, yeah. And of course, the catch-22 for all the interstate teams is, if you can win at home, perfectly fine. Right. But if you can't win on the road at MCG, you're not going to win a flag.
Exactly. Yep. Exactly. So you.
But yeah, the fields are smaller because they have to be.
You mentioned that you're a
slightly small.
You mentioned that you're a GWS fan. How are you feeling about Jonathan Patton looking as solid as he's looked in the first couple March games with Hawthorn?
I'm happy for him. And the same kind of went when Scully went over to Hawthorn last year.
Right.
Those guys had a really terrible run of luck with injuries.
Right.
John O'Patton, blew out his knee a few times. Scully had an Achilles injury. He had a knee injury. Both those guys could definitely have used with a fresh start, because given the Giants' depth, even guys like that were going to be on the chopping block, considering there were so many talented young kids that were waiting in the wings to potentially step forward. So no hard feelings with that. I reckon if Patton stays healthy, he's going to have a really big season.
Yeah,
and Hawthorn needs a big guy like him, because a lot of their big forwards are getting up in age. Of course, you had Rioli retire a few years ago. You had a few other guys like Roughhead. Yeah, they're kind of, it's a changing of the guard down there at Hawthorn, but I reckon they'll be in pretty good stead if they can keep those guys healthy, and who knows, they might even sneak back into the 8 this year. I think they could.
Yeah, I think that if Mitchell's healthy, yeah, I think they will. And
oh, definitely.
And I think they're going to be back in the 8. I don't know who drops out, maybe Essendon, but I think they will
maybe.
be. Now, a couple other things I wanted to get that I had jotted down that I wanted to get to that that you had mentioned, and people should know just about how committed you are to this sport, to this game, is that you currently you're now working on a new podcast of your own with Wayne Kraska, and I'm pronouncing that right. It is Kraska, correct?
Yeah,
okay.
That's correct.
Who runs the Atlanta Kookaburras?
Yeah, and Kraz has been around a long time. He's been in the U.S. for like 20 years at this point. He's a Melbourne guy. He played footy down there, coached footy in, I think it was Country Victoria for a while.
Okay.
And Atlanta is, they're kind of up and down. Sometimes they have a really, in terms of just like getting and keeping players, they're kind of up and down a little bit, but they've been around for a long time, and they're one of the oldest clubs in the country. And so, Kraz does a great job. Of course, he's over in Rome, Georgia, which is like an hour and a half away. So he has his own metro team, and they play at regionals, they play at nationals. I only got a chance to meet Kraz because like at nationals in Wisconsin a few years ago, LA had to loan a few players to Atlanta, who was in the D4 side that weekend. We didn't do that well, unfortunately, but I was definitely impressed by Kraz's enthusiasm. He's helped out on the USAFL board. Okay. I think he was one of the Eastern region presidents or vice presidents for a few years. He's a very passionate guy, and he was the one who started up usfootynews.com. And he wanted me to write articles for them, which I had done previously for World Footy News, which is independent of.
Yep, that's on my list. That's on my list to ask you about. Yeah. So,
well, I don't want to steal your thunder.
That's okay.
But Kraz, Kraz hit me up in like October, November. He was like, "Oh yeah, you want to do a podcast?" And we had kind of discussed it previously, but he wasn't 100% sold on the idea. But I guess I convinced him, and then we Once I got back from Australia, we started recording it, and now we're up to 10 or 11 episodes. So we're moving right along.
Yeah, you are flying. Yeah, because it came out. You guys are on a quicker schedule than once a week, though, if I'm not mistaken. You guys are coming out.
We try to record at least. We try to record 2 times a week. Obviously, it depends on our guests' availability.
Right.
Kraz works from home, so he's frequently able to have a flexible enough schedule to record something like this. So basically, we try to record at least 2 a week, and then release 1 or 2, time permitting.
Okay, yeah.
If Kraz is able to edit everything down,
right.
You know how it is.
Right. No, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there will not be a lot of editing in our interview tonight. There's not a whole lot that I'm going to have to take out of this. It's real. It's live. It's what it is. So he had his U.S. paper or site that he wanted you to write for, but you were also writing for the World Footy News, and you wrote several dozen articles for that publication.
I did.
Yeah. And are you still writing for them?
Not as much lately, but I'm always available if they need something to be written. Basically, how that happened, that was another funny story. So during it was like the winter of 2016, 2017, like after my first half season with the Dragons, when I was first really falling in love with the sport, right? And so basically, I was kind of going through footy withdrawals during the Northern Hemisphere winter, Southern Hemisphere summer.
Right.
And as it turned out, there is one league, the NTFL, in Australia, the Northern Territory Footy League. And because the weather is so dramatically different up there, they have to switch like the cricket season and the footy season because they're a tropical climate up in the Northern Territory, specifically Darwin. And so basically it's the dry season and the wet season. Obviously, it's impossible to play cricket in the wet. So you have to play cricket in the winter when the rest of Australia is playing footy, and you have to play footy in the summer when the rest of Australia is playing cricket. And the NTFL is really high quality competition. I started watching the games. They live stream the games on YouTube. It's a really fun league to watch. So just out of boredom, sometimes I would stay up late, till like 2 a.m. and just live tweet these games.
Okay.
It was just something fun to do, and I never thought anything would come of it. Then out of the blue, I saw that one of my tweets was liked by World Footy News. And I was like, oh, who are these guys? I looked them up. The website was awesome. I noticed that they had reporters who were talking about footy everywhere from Croatia to Colombia to the US to Fiji, all over the world. And then they dropped me a line on Twitter, kind of like how you did, and just out of the blue. And they were like, hey, we were thumbing through your profile. And you're obviously very knowledgeable, very passionate about footy. Do you want to write for us? And I was like, yeah, sure, why not? And I, as fate would have it, on my own personal blog, I was actually blogging about footy, a little bit of the history of footy. I think I sent some of them to you previously. And yeah, just like how awesome this crazy sport is. And so I sent them a few writing samples from my blog.
Okay.
And they were like, yeah, this is really good. This is really good stuff, Rick. You can write for us. And as it turned out, and this was a pretty crazy connection, Troy Thompson, who is who runs the website, I caught up with him a few times in Melbourne. I actually first met him when he came out to San Diego in 2017 for USAFL Nationals. Good bloke. Okay. But yeah, Troy, as it turned out, had played cricket with a guy I knew at the Dragons by the name of Chili. And he's like, oh, do you know a guy named Chili in LA? And I'm like, yeah, of course. And he's like, oh, yeah, back in the day, he and I used to play cricket together.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. This is definitely a small world example here. You getting that gig writing those kind of makes my getting a retweet from the NIRS the National Indigenous Radio Service broadcasts kind of pale in comparison to yeah, because sometimes I'll listen to if I'm not watching the games. I like watching AFL 360. I like listening to Waitley call games, but another person online had suggested, well, listen to the Indigenous Radio Service, and he said they do a great job, and I started listening to them because on the SEN website you can go to a game and then select which service's broadcast you want to listen to. Which, I'm amazed that, that like for each game, there are like 6 or 7 different radio outlets that are doing that game. Whether it's, trip with Triple M and NIRS and SEN and the AFL actually has their own radio as well that they're doing. So it's great to have those options. And I really enjoyed listening to those people. And I sent out a couple tweets, at 2 o'clock in the morning and got responses from them. And they were like, wait, you're in the United States listening to us? Yeah, I am. Right? So that's not quite as exciting as your gig there. But that's that's fascinating. And by the way, for those of you who are listening, that website for that where Rick was writing is worldfootynews.com. So if you want to check out some of Rick's work that I'm sure is still there, or the work that's being done now, you can definitely take a look at it there.
Yeah, it's under Frederick, which is my full name.
It's under Frederick. Okay.
Yeah, and I've written like 40 or 45 articles at this point, and it's definitely really fun. I dig it.
Okay. Now, we've kind of run through all of the questions that I had put together to ask Rick, but I reached out to his club in Australia earlier this week, and I told them that I was going to have him on for an interview. And I said to them, are there any questions that you could provide me that I could ask that he might get a kick out of, and I'm hoping that they don't embarrass him at all. And if it's something you go, I don't want to answer it, feel free to just say pass. Okay. Because I don't know the backstory on these. They did not provide me the answers. They only gave me the questions. All right. So you feel free to answer what you want to answer here. And I have a feeling that once they hear this part, a lot of them are going to be laughing. Okay. So, and some of them are serious. So the first one was, what was it like to kick your first goal against Albion?
Oh my God. That was so much fun. Can I ask who asked that question?
Give me a second. I have to go back and see who it was that gave me the information. I think it was a female's name that gave me the info. I'm just pulling up my Facebook page right now here. Let me go back here and see.
Okay.
That works. I'm recording on an old MacBook and I'm looking at my Facebook on a Chromebook, and the Chromebook is moving very slowly right now. So, let's see here. So why don't you go ahead and, provide the answer for that if you would, and then I'll see if I can find out who it was that shared that with me.
Yeah, no, that was such a fun moment. Like I had mostly been like rotating in off the bench in the first few games, and then Albion came along, and oh my God, we shut them out. I think the final score line was something like 2014, 238 to 0-0-0. Like it was an actual shutout, and oh God, we felt bad, but it was an amazing win, and and towards the end of the third quarter, beginning of the fourth quarter, when we were up by so many points, our coach was just like, we need to give other people some opportunities. Because like our leading goal kicker, Bailey, he had hit like 6 or 7 at that point. So we wanted to spread the wealth around. And I had missed a shot on goal previously. It had only dropped like a meter short in the goal square. So I was kicking myself for that. And they put me up at full forward, and I jumped up and grabbed it from like 35 meters out. And I was like, oh my God, I could score my first goal. And it was really cold out. And I was just like, okay, this is it. This is what's going to happen. And I saw the senior boys. This is in the reserves. The senior boys were up on the upper oval doing their warm-ups. And all of a sudden they stopped. And they stopped doing their drills. And their eyes were focused on me. And I'm like, oh God, I better not screw this up. But no, I went back, slotted the goal, and it went through perfectly. And everyone got around me. I was getting drenched with water bottles. Everyone was jumping on top of me, rubbing my hair.
Okay,
it was an amazing feeling. By the end of the night,
go ahead.
By the end of the night, even the Albion guys, they even knew who I was. And one of them came up to me and was like, "Yeah, mate, great goal." And I'm like, "Oh, thanks. I have no idea who you are, but I really appreciate it."
The follow up to that was, and I think I have to emphasize the way they wrote it. I think I have to put a little emphasis on the question. It says, how well did you really play with your best on ground performance?
Well, ironically, that was the Albion game. I had zero expectation that I would get anything for that. Because, I mean, you never really have any control over who gets BOG, because like, that's not something you're really privy to. And if I'm honest with you, you don't really think about it during the game. You're just trying to, get off the next kick or get off the next handball. But then when I saw it on the website, like the WRFL website, I was like, holy crap. I'm just glad that we won so easily. I'm glad I scored a goal. I never expected to get best on ground. And because they had to take the piss out of me, the next week, they fined me $2 because I posted about it on social media. I was just like, oh, pretty good day at the office today. We had a shutout win and I got best on ground. And because of that, they're just like, oh yeah, $2 pay up. And I was just like, oh, okay,
you're supposed to be a little bit more modest, I take it then. And let the
fines are just a way to embarrass people, take the piss out of each other. It's good fun.
Kind of like the kangaroo court that they do in baseball. Yeah. Okay. I found the name. So, you can reach out to Crystal, because Crystal's who provided these questions. Okay.
Oh, great. Crystal Delancey. She's great. Big
All
fan
right.
of her.
Now, the second question they said was, how did you feel after being cleaned up in your first practice match against Hepburn Springs with a hospital handball? And who gave you the handball that set you up?
Oh gosh, I can't even remember. But that was kind of it was a preseason match at Hepburn Springs. It's like way out there. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere on the way to Melton, if I remember correctly. It was so like western like parts of outside of the metro area. But yeah, like I don't remember who I handballed it to, but there were a couple of moments in that game where I definitely wish I could have taken back, because that was even for a preseason match, that was a really physical game. And it was definitely good practice for what we were going to deal with going into the rest of the season.
Okay.
And whose question
No,
was that?
these all came from her. So maybe she is the one that she may have been the one that compiled them. Because, like I said, I sent them a note on Messenger. Yeah. Maybe she passed around index cards and said, "Hey, Rick's doing an interview. How can we make him laugh or embarrass him or whatever they're trying to do with these?" Right. Now, this is one that I think you're going to have a chance to throw somebody else under the bus. Okay, who was the worst driver to ever give you a lift home after training?
Oh gosh, it'd have to be. Well, actually, this wasn't after training. This was another time, but definitely Anthony Malici. Okay, he's definitely he's a. It was a hair-raising experience, but it's all good.
Okay. Now, the one question that I did share with you initially when you were like, where did you get that information? And they wanted to know, did you actually rig the Footy Club iPod Shuffle Night to win the major prize?
I did not. So, full story. So about halfway through the season, we had what we called the iPod Shuffle Night. Just a great way to, after a home game, to just have a few beers, relax, chill at the Footy Clubhouse, and just have a good time with your mates. And this time it was iPod Shuffle Night. I think Banja had come up with it, if I remember correctly. But basically the idea is you take out $20, you put it into a pool, you pick out one song that you really like, and then 40, 45 blokes at the club, they all have one song each. They all put $20 in, and whoever's song is played last walks away with all the cash. And it got up to $400.
Okay, so you were playing the music on shuffle then, so it was randomizing. Okay, now I get it. Okay.
Yeah. And the irony was that, well, firstly, I never win anything. I've never really won any raffles. I've never won any prizes. And the irony was that I had switched up my song halfway through. I was like, oh, hey, Keenan, I think it was Keenan. I was like, oh, hey, can I switch my song request at the last minute? And I changed it to Smooth by Santana. Okay. And I was like, okay, this should be fun. And as it turned out, it was the last one that got picked. And I was like, holy shit, I just won $400 cash. Cool. And so that's how it happened. And that was a fun night.
It was $400 Australian. So, okay. Those of you listening in Australia, I'm kidding. Okay. So please don't hang up. Please don't sign off and unsubscribe. Okay. But so who was and this is one of those questions you may not want to answer. Who was the best player you played with at Caroline Springs?
Oh, gosh, too many to mention, but I will give a few honorable shout outs. Frankie Campisi, leading goal kicker, absolute legend. Jezza, Jerome Caterino, one of my best mates at the Footy Club, Max Tassari. Just some phenomenal players. Louis Tudor at fullback. He's phenomenal. Hoods, or Mark Peduto, plays hurt all the time. You never see him complain. Ricka, Banja, there were just too many to name. I was genuinely lucky to be around, not just high quality people, but high quality players, because these guys, again, it's not just that they've been playing since they were kids. They've continued to work at their footy. They continue to attack rehab if they're injured. There are all sorts of guys who they eat, sleep, and breathe footy. They really do. And I was lucky to be able to learn from those guys. So shout out to everyone. I'm not going to discriminate, but there were so many guys that I really enjoyed being around and playing with, because when you see them with the footy, and they're just going to do something spectacular. Okay.
Now I think we can safely say you have a future in politics after that answer, where you named a whole of so now your time in Australia is winding down, is what this question is leading to. What was it like living with Aaron King for your last days in Australia?
Oh, Kingy. Shout out to Kingy. Oh, this guy's a legend. I first went over to his place when he had a barbecue for Australia Day, right when I first arrived. And he and Andre from the Dragons, they go way back. He was one of the crazy guys in my circle of friends in Melbourne. we had a pretty eventful, pretty crazy end of year footy trip to Adelaide in October, and staying with Kingy for a few nights. This was, just before I flew out to go back to LA around New Year's, or right after New Year's, I should say. But yeah, he's married. He has a couple kids who are just adorable, and he's a crazy guy. So it's always fun, having a few beers or playing some backyard cricket. He and his wife are great, and whenever Kingy throws a party, you're going to run into some people that and it's always a good time. Okay. So Kingy's a real character. Definitely a big fan of his.
Did you go to the CSFC footy trip, and what did you enjoy or dislike about the trip? And rumor has it you were best on. Is that true?
I was not best on. I got a few votes for it, which I definitely appreciated. That was, for those of you who don't know whether it's in the U.S. or elsewhere, end of year footy trips are kind of a tradition at footy clubs. This year we went to Adelaide, or last year I should say, in October. And we had a really awesome time. It was my first time in Adelaide. Went clubbing, went to the horse races. We had a really awesome time. Again, I did not get best on, but I did not get worst on either. And we had a really crazy time. It was awesome. It was about 15 or 16 guys who came. And Dingas, Daniel Ingram, another really good friend of mine, he was the one who organized it and got everything arranged with the hostel and the horse races and all that other good stuff. And I still have the singlet, the little ceremonial CSFC footy trip 2019. And we patterned the logo to look like Carlton Draught, one of the popular beers in Australia. So it's the exact same logo. It just says Lakers Adelaide 2019. And then it has all our names on the back.
Okay. Do they actually give out the worst on ground award?
They did for footy trip. They did, and it was the same. It was the same singlet tank top thing, but it was pink instead of red. So and it said worst on the back.
Right. Okay. So now, what was the best joke you told at the footy club's Thursday night fines and dinner? And keep in mind before you answer, I do list my podcast as clean. So just go ahead.
Right. That would definitely limit me, I'm afraid. But that became kind of a tradition because, again, with fines, we had a little wheel of fortune type thing where you had to spin the wheel and your fine would double the next week, or you would have to shave your head, or you'd have to sing a song, or you'd have to get a spray tan or something like that. So it was all just, goofy tongue-in-cheek stuff. And basically, the whole joke thing started as you have to get up in front of the footy club and tell a joke. And I did. And my favorite one was, you may or may not have heard this one before. So a Texan is on vacation or on holiday in Ireland, and he walks into the pub and he makes a bet. He says, "Now I've heard that you Irishmen are really good drinkers, and I'm going to place a bet that you can't finish 5 pints in a row without stopping and within less than a minute." And he's like, "Okay, you're on." And and then the guy leaves, the Irishman leaves, and the Texan is just there sitting in the bar. He's like, "What's happening? Why did he leave? We placed a bet." And then he comes back after about 20 minutes, and then he drinks all the pints in a row without stopping. And he's like, "Yeah, pay up." And the Texan is, pretty amazed. And he's like, "Dude, that's incredible. I was definitely right. But why did you leave for 20 minutes? And the Irishman just says, "Oh, that was my second run. I had to go to the other pub down the street to do some practice."
Okay, that's good. That's good. And I appreciate. It may have been a little bit more flowery when you told it, but I appreciate you. Yeah. Thank you. Now, how much did your footy develop over your year in Australia?
Oh,
See,
heaps.
they
Again,
they actually asked you a legitimate question there. That's from them, not from me.
Oh yeah. Again, I knew going in that my skills were going to be raw, that I needed to refine a lot of things and again lose a lot of those bad habits or unlearn those bad habits. But I know I'm coming back a much better, much fitter, much more intelligent footballer. And yeah, obviously learning from so many different people and, people who are willing to give me tips and pointers, again, got to give a few more shout outs. Richie Waruki Barba, always willing to help me out with my kicking style. Blake Richards, Mitch Gilbert, Jake Nucky, all those guys, they were always really willing to, again, even if my questions got annoying or, if I was dealing with something or trying to perfect a certain type of kick, they were always patient with me. They were always encouraging. And again, they were always willing to take the piss out of me too. So
this was you asking asking questions, helping to learn how to become a better player. That's to be applauded. Now, what was your favorite moment overall with the footy club there?
Too many to list, but one of my favorites was Banja came up with this. Like he was really big on like the memes and stuff like that, and he was all. This was when that song "Old Town Road" was getting big, and it was all over the radio. And so whenever we would like go for our 1 or 2 lap warm up run before stretching and then getting into training, Banja and Rika, because of course they're the captain and vice captain, they would be the ones leading the charge, and so. And Banja would always be like, I got the horses in the back when we started running, and we would all crack up. So that was definitely fun. And yeah, like, again, we always had laughs off the field, and we needed them because we had so many injuries that season. And, we could have done so much better than we did, but it was really difficult. So, but if you don't have your mates back, then you're not a good teammate. Right. So it's always good to be able to rely on each other, even when the season or even when the game doesn't go your way.
Did you come out of the season unscathed, or did you get banged up as well?
Thankfully, I was unscathed, but we had players dropping like flies every week. We had a guy tear like every ligament in his knee. Man. We had a guy break his jaw. We had a guy rupture a couple other ligaments in his knee. We had other guys with like AC joint issues. Yeah. And we had one guy who lost a kidney in a game and he almost died.
Wow.
So,
wow. Well,
yeah, that was horrible. We had a guy named Mitch McLean. He was McLean. He was one of our defenders. And this was at a game in Werribee. I wasn't playing that game in the Resis or the seniors. So I was running water for them. And he was just going up to grab a mark in defense, and it was a pretty standard hit. There was nothing dirty about it. And the guy just hit him as he was trying to mark it. And this was like 15 feet away from me. Like I had to sprint to get out of the way because I was running water. But yeah, it just looked like a standard hit. And then this is right before halftime, like 5 minutes before halftime. And then he staggers over to the sideline, Sarah, one of our trainers, she's trying to have a look at Mitch. And the second she touches him, he's like, don't touch me, I can't breathe. And then I'm continuing to run water. I'm obviously concerned about it. And then 5 minutes later, when it's halftime, I see Mitch. He's slumped over on the bench, slipping in and out of unconsciousness. The ambulance drives onto the oval as halftime starts. And they load him up in the ambo. As it turned out, the actual hit ruptured his kidney. And he had to have emergency surgery at the Royal Melbourne Hospital. And he lost something like 2 liters of blood, and he still has like an 18-inch scar on his abdomen where they had to cut him open. And we all visited him in the hospital. Yeah, we all visited him in hospital. He was in really good spirits. But yeah, he lost the kidney, and boom, career over, just like that. So
that's
it was terrible. It was terrible. That was like halfway through the season, and it hit us all really hard. And thankfully, us and Spotswood, his former club, we combined to like give him a special jersey, thanking him for all the games he'd played, and we promised that he's still going to be involved in the footy club at some point in the future. we're just going to have to figure out a role for him. But it was terrible. Like it just seeing how it happened. And, again, just like that, just a regular hit in a regular game, it's like a 1 in 5,000 chance that you would ever have any catastrophic injury like that. But he was just one of the unlucky ones.
That's terrible. And I'm going to go ahead and mention it here since, you talked about your dad having broken his collarbone 4 times way back at the beginning of this. When I was a kid, a little kid, before I was even a teenager, I broke the same kid's arm 3 times. The same kid. Yeah, he was like 5 years older than I was. It was my best friend's older brother. I knocked him off the jungle gym in my backyard, broke his arm. We were playing football. We were playing football in their backyard. I tackled him. He broke his left arm. The day he got the cast off of his left arm, we were out playing ball in the backyard again. He decided to come out and play. I broke his right arm the day he got the cast off of his left arm. And this is a story. This is a story that this story I told my son, all his life. He's 23 years old now, and he's like, "Yeah, right, Dad. Okay, sure, that happened." Well, one day we happened to be at Wendy's here in town. And one of the kids I grew up with happened to be there having lunch. And I said, Roger, could you tell my son about, and I'm Randy, and I'm not going to say the last name. And he said, "Oh, you mean how you broke his arm 3 times?" And my son looked at me. "You were telling the truth about that?" I said, "Yeah, I was. I don't lie to you about anything." Well, and I could tell him, said, "You know what? And I know that I'm telling the truth because that Roger I just asked is a county municipal judge, somebody I grew up with around the corner who saw all 3 of these happen. He's a judge, so he's not going to be lying about it."
Wow.
So, yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So
wow.
Two last questions here. One of them you may not want to answer. Who was your favorite person at the footy club? That's a hard one to answer.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm going to pass on that.
I completely understand that. Maybe you get the wheel and spin that and come up with that one
I'm just gonna assume that Dean O'Shea asked that question.
Was he hoping you would mention his name then?
I like to think that he would.
The last question that they had, apart from yourself, which one of the boys was a crowd favorite with the ladies?
Oh. Oh gosh, I'd say it's a good one. I'd say it was Mark Paduto or Puds. He had this little thing that happened on Footy Trip. It was like this little juggling thing he kind of did with like after he was finished with a beer or something or a can of like Jack and Coke or something like that. He'd always kind of flip it around and play with it for a little bit and just kind of do a little juggle to himself. And we started like privately doing like a #Puds challenge where like we would video ourselves trying to do it because none of us could do it exactly like him. But yeah, Puds is pretty good with the ladies. And he's also and thankfully for the ladies, he's also good with kids because he's a teacher.
There you go.
So yeah, he's a PE. Yeah, he's a PE teacher and a pretty popular one. Like I imagine his coworkers have some similar goofy stories as the teammates. Maybe
this will get heard in their teacher staff room, and they'll get to hear about some of these things. Yeah. Okay. Well, we ran through the gamut of questions that I had here, and you came out unscathed, and I'm thrilled to have had a chance to talk to you. Again, this has been my interview with Rick Shaibani, and he's a member of the LA Dragons footy team, and he also is one of the co-hosts of the Outside 50 podcast. Rick, this has been a ton of fun. It's made my Friday evening, and it's not even 7:00 yet. So I truly appreciate you coming on. I'm looking forward to getting us out there for the folks in Australia to hear, and hopefully you won't get too much hate mail if you called somebody out that that didn't want to get called out. And don't give Crystal too much grief for coming up with some of these questions, okay?
Oh, I definitely won't. But yeah, I'm just amazed that you were able to reach out to so many people and hear some embarrassing stories and some not so embarrassing stories. But I definitely appreciate all the Caroline Springs guys and girls hitting you up, or you hitting them up and asking some questions. So I definitely appreciate it. Again, I miss all those guys every day. And if I can close with one thing, as it relates to everything we've talked about, like firstly, if you're a Yank, if you're playing footy and you're still young enough to take a working holiday in Australia and play footy down there, do it. You won't regret it. And also, secondly, I really want stuff like this to continue. Again, we've got so many talented players in America who just need more refining of their skills. And I want to keep it going in terms of LA and Caroline Springs, and I want to see other sister club partnerships start happening. Like, it's a great idea. It's a great way to get people involved and get around it. And again, if you spend a year in Australia as a Yank and play down there, you're going to be much better for it as an athlete and as a person.
Terrific.
So, if you're on the fence, if you haven't, given it a go yet, or if you've always wanted to, definitely give it a crack. And again, I just hope we can keep the lines of communication open.
Absolutely. And I've enjoyed this conversation, and I'm hoping we can do this again about, different issues as your podcast moves forward, as mine moves forward. It was great, and I'll be honest, I'll be the first to tell you, I'm not that terribly well versed in things going on with footy here in the States. I mean, I've found the website, I've looked at the teams, there's a team about an hour away from me. The Cleveland team, and then there's the one in Columbus a couple hours away. But I haven't delved too deeply into that yet. I've tried to get some of them to come on yet, but I haven't made any connections yet as far as conducting any interviews. But again, Rick, I want to thank you for coming on. This has been a lot of fun. I hope those of you who are listening, I hope you've enjoyed it. I appreciate it. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Craig. Pleasure to be here.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was my interview with Rick Shaibani of the LA Dragons and the Outside 50 podcast. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. It was an absolute blast to conduct that interview tonight, and I'm hoping to talk to Rick again very, very soon. Ladies and gentlemen, I honestly cannot tell you how fortunate I feel knowing that you're tuning in to listen to my show. It is humbling. That's the best word I can think of to describe it. That you are taking time out of your schedule, knowing how busy you are, knowing how many hours there are in a day, and you've made the choice to listen to me. I truly, truly appreciate it. If you're enjoying my podcast, I would greatly appreciate it if you would consider sharing it with a friend. You can find the link to the show in the show notes, or they could simply put a Yank on the Footy into their favorite search engine. And don't forget, while you can find all of my episodes on this podcast at ayankonthefooty.podbean.com, you can also find it on your favorite podcast provider. Now that you've listened, I would hope you'd think about giving me a review. I've had some great ones lately. One of them that said, "This Yank knows his footy." That was extraordinarily humbling. And I want to let you know that you can reach me at ayankonthefooty@gmail.com, as well as on Twitter at yank_on, and on Facebook and Instagram at ayankonthefooty. Again, I'd like to thank Rick Shaibani of the LA Dragons and the Outside 50 podcast for being my guest. I also want to thank Crystal from the Caroline Springs Football Club for helping me organize the questions at the end of the interview. They were truly a great deal of fun to present. Also, I'd like to thank Mr. Joseph McDade for the use of two of his great pieces of music. Mr. McDade creates some fantastic music, and I'm using the pieces Elevation and Backplate. You can find Mr. McDade's work at josephmcdade.com/music. Again, Mr. McDade, thanks again for your hard work and your wonderful music. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you, because while many of us are fans of our own teams, deep down we're a fan, and we are fans of a game that we all love, and that's the game of footy. Again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much, and may your dribble kick never hit the post. I'll catch you later. This has been episode 12 of A Yank on the Footy, my interview with Rick Shaibani. Don't forget that you can reach me at yank_on Twitter or at ayankonthefooty@gmail.com. Again, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for listening, and please consider sharing the podcast with your friends and family. Until next time, goodbye.